Hello, John.
Oh,
Let's start with some context to familiarize our audiences with you. So, tell me about yourself. Who's John Clancy, and what has he done with his life so far?
man, what a waste! What a waste! So much potential. I no, well, I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, Midwest, America. Studied as an actor at Oberlin College in Ohio. Graduated. Spent a year in grad school in Dallas, Texas, for acting, where I met my wife, which was the only thing that I got out of grad school. And after a year, I started writing. I wasn't getting a lot of acting work. I was in LA for about a year, um, moved back to Dallas, Texas to be with Nancy, and started writing. We moved to New York City in 1990. She had a good agent. She was a sort of a big shot. She did a lot of soap operas and commercials and that kind of stuff. And so we moved to New York, and I wasn't getting the acting work, so I started writing roles that I would want to play. And I had a lot of success with that very early. Won some national awards, got some productions in New York, and then I started writing very strange things. If you go back to the 90s in America, uh, the only real schools of playwriting, big schools, were Mamet and Shepard. So
Right.
you were either writing kind of bad Shepard imitations, kind of, scroungy, angry, we used to call it like guys with guns and girls who took their clothes off and you'd break a chair at some point during the play. Knives, this kind of shit. And trying to be poetic, but usually just being incoherent. Or Mammoth, which was just staccato, fucking fast, quick,
Yeah.
mean, very much about America. And that was it. So I wrote a Bad Shepherd piece. I wrote a pretty decent Mammoth piece, and then I just started writing just crazy shit. And because my whole impulse was to write theater and not drama. To write, when I teach playwriting, it's like, there's a huge difference between theater and drama, and basically, if you're writing drama, you're writing a piece of literature, which is great, it's beautiful. George Bernard Shaw, all those guys. If you're writing theater, you're basically writing a blueprint for a live event, and
Right.
you have to understand that it's not. It's just that you have to write it as clear as you can, exactly as if you're an architect and you're going to give it to a contractor, and it's got to be clear. When it's all said and done, they have to build the thing, to your specifications, and then they can decorate it any way they want to.
Right.
But
Right.
you're basically writing a blueprint. So I started writing stuff, and nobody wanted to direct that at all. Nobody wanted to produce it. So I started directing it. Nancy and I started a company, the Present Company, back in '94, I guess, in New York. And we had a lot of fun. We had a lot of, some success, but mostly just a lot of fun. We opened up a little theater in Hell's Kitchen. We got the idea for the New York International Fringe Festival in probably '96. We did that in '97 with a bunch of people. And that first year, '97, we had 175 productions in 21 theaters that were, bars and basements and, all this
Yeah.
on the Lower East Side. I think one actual theater, and over 11 days. And we put on, if you add that all up, we put on over 1,200
Oh my
individual performances.
God.
Each company had about 5, 6, 7 shows, depending on the length of their
Yeah.
show, and it was not. It was insane. Did it with no budget. Did it with no staff. All volunteer. Nobody died, so we kept doing it again, and we did that for. It's still going on, I think. But we did it. Nancy and I did it for 5 years, and then we just kind of got bored because it began to run itself. It became a machine. So the excitement was kind of gone. So we started our own company, Clancy Productions, took all of our shows that we had been doing over the years and toured the world with them, and we had a lot of luck. We broke into the Edinburgh Festival Fringe our first year, and we just had, through some flukes and some good relationships, we killed. We did really well, and so we kept being able to go back that's the gateway. That festival is the gateway to all the other English-speaking festivals, big ones. All the promoters are there, all the producers are there.
Mm.
So we did that for about 8 years, and then that first recession hit, and the work just went away.
Mm-hmm.
So we just sort of doped around for a while, and now we're out in, of all places, Southern Illinois, Mount Carmel, Illinois, this tiny little beautiful Mayberry RFD town. And we, as of last week, now we bought 2 big old buildings, an old bank and an old bar that are next to each other. So it's really one complex. And it's the Little Egypt Art Center. So we're going to try to do what we do out here.
That's excellent. Yeah. Yeah. And bringing together artists of all stripes, right, into
Exactly.
sort of a community. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. That's something that we're really interested in doing over here too.
Yeah, it's important. It's important where you really have to get with the local artists, not in any condescending way. It's like, wow, this is, I mean, I'm telling you, man, some of the local musicians and the local visual artists and some of the theater people, I mean, top notch. They just never decided to run off to New York or anywhere. They just stayed here.
Right.
But then to hook them up, which we've been able to do already with some artists from other places, is really exciting. It's just fun to watch the hybrid and the mutual sort of oh wow, now you just inspired me to do this, and
Yeah. So Fat Boy, then let's talk about Fat Boy.
Sure.
That's the show in question. What led to that? What led to Fat Boy becoming a reality?
Well, it was funny. I was thinking about this last night because I knew we were going to have this conversation. It's funny that the first maybe 5-6 pages, the first exchange between Fludgy and Fat Boy in Act 1 actually goes back to probably 1991, because Nancy and I had just been married, and I was sitting there, and she was making money. I wasn't making any money, and so I'm sitting there in the apartment trying to be a writer. And it was basically just a gag, It was like, let's just boil, marriage down to its worst, most brutal reality, and that was it. And it was really like 5 pages that I just put away. I mean, I do that a lot. Where you get a little inspiration, you make sure you write it down, but then you just put it away. Years later, Nancy my wife is a brain tumor survivor. And so in 2002, July, she presented with a malignant brain tumor. And she had the surgery. She's still alive. She's a couple doors down. But that really pissed me off. That really, really got me angry. And then, of course, what had happened earlier with the attacks on the towers, which happened about a mile away from where we live, in New York City, and then of course we invaded Afghanistan, right. And that really pissed me off. So I was really just sitting there in this stew of not rage exactly, but really angry, and I remember this piece of this lunatic, shouting and yelling, pulled it out. A friend of mine, Colin Young of Reverie Productions, had a reading series, and he was looking for short pieces. He said, "Do you have anything?" And I said, "Well, I think I can write a short piece." And I wrote the first act of Fat Boy, and we presented, stage reading. And we've all been through hundreds of stage readings, and they're usually fun, they're cool, they're interesting. Yeah. I've never seen anything like this, man. I mean, we rehearsed it for half an hour, right? And sat down in front of, 30 people, folding chairs. And the room blew up. I mean, it was like, and everyone's like yelling, when are you gonna finish it? What's next? I was like, I don't know. And so, I finished. I just kept writing. And Colin actually was the original producer, and he said, "I want to do this in Edinburgh." So, bam, but it all just sort of came out like it. There was no plan to it, It was really just sort of, joke to joke, outrage to outrage. Yeah.
Were you writing it with specific people in mind to cast?
Yeah, I knew. I mean, that's the as you probably know, one of the great things about having a company, even if it's an informal company,
Yeah.
is you can, Clifford Odets wrote Waiting for Lefty with all the group theater guys directly, and so he knew their rhythms, he knew
Right.
what they could do, he could see them doing it. Yeah,
Right.
I did. I wrote it for, I wrote it for Nancy. I wrote it for a guy named Del Pentecost, who we worked for forever.
Yeah.
Worked forever, and yeah, and Calvito, and well, most of that original cast, with the exception of Mike McShane, who premiered the role in Edinburgh, Fat Boy, and we had never worked with Mike, but he was a big star, basically. He was in the original Whose Line Is It Anyway, the English versions. He's the big fat American. And he loved the piece. I talked to him, really took a risk, because I'd never worked with him. I had no idea. I asked somebody who worked for him, you might want to edit this out, but you might not want to. I asked somebody, I said, Mike McShane is interested in doing this. And the producers, of course, are like, cast him. He sells tickets. He's a big star over there. And I said, have you worked with Mike? What's up? What's a mutual friend? And he said, yeah, I worked with Mike. Two things about McShane. He will always have the best drugs, and no one will be more professional. I was like, that's a good combination. That's pretty rare. And it was true. He was so great. But then he couldn't do the New York premiere, so that reverted back to Del. And Del did it a couple times, I think. But yeah, I did. Yeah, I had Jody, Matt, Calvito. I kind of knew that they could pull it off, because it's not, as you're finding out, it's deceptively difficult piece. It looks pretty straight up, but it's very demanding on the performers. Very demanding. There's a lot of.
Yesterday, actually, we ran the first act with 4 different tones. I wanted to experiment to sort of see what we might be missing, what might have escaped our attention because we've been performing in a certain way. So we did it as at first we did it as sort of a manic, zany, zazz sort of airplane comedy. Then we did it as a BBC drama. Then we did it as a preschool show, like a show for preschool children. And then we did it as a horror. And a lot of really interesting things came out of that.
I would love to see that. Wow. Yeah.
So but what we found, I think, and we found all through the rehearsal process, is that it's a play of, there's surprising moments of depth. There are points being made that the play is so outrageous, right? It's so in your face that, in a way you think, this is not a play in which there's room for subtlety or nuance.
Yeah,
right? But there is, and it's hiding underneath the bluster. It's hiding underneath that brashness.
Exactly. And if you drop into that and just drop into it and pop right back out, but nail it and then go on, then the piece really builds into a very interesting thing.
Right.
Yeah, I had the privilege of, or the luck or whatever. Somebody yelling at me. When I first directed it, I'd written it, and then we went on tour, 2 tours actually, back to back, to England and then to Australia, for about, 8 or 9 months. And then when we flew back from London, Australia, we had to go into rehearsal the next day to then take it to Edinburgh. And we had a month, and bang, we're going to take it to Edinburgh. So I was just wiped. I thought, you know what? I said, let's just look at this script. We all had the script. We're all sitting around. And I said, somebody else wrote this, man. I finished this a year ago. And that was a different guy, And so let's just look at it. Let's just do basic script analysis on what we're looking at before we even get into it. And I found all kinds of stuff where it's just like, what is this? What is, and a lot of it, I realized there's a lot of religious shit in it, in a dark kind of agnostic way, but it's there, I don't know, it's not agnostic is exactly the word. I had to the tone of it, or to the whatever, the subtlety or the difficulty of it, I've seen maybe 3 or 4 different productions across the country, and it's sometimes I had this heartbreaking. So a company did it in oh, what's it called? That big naval base down in the south, Newport News, I think. And she was so excited about the piece. She'd seen it, and she did it in a really tiny little theater, and it was disastrous. And she wrote back, and she was just, I didn't see it, but she was like, I am so sorry. I didn't realize how tough it was. And she cast, good people, but she didn't prep them for what it was going to be. And so they couldn't pull it off, and I've seen other productions where it's just that, where it's like, you thought this was just a farce or whatever. It was just like, and it's like, no, man, it's opera, in a sense.
Right.
And as far as the performances, it's like, you really got to be able to pull it and drop in a second and jump. And also, I don't know what you guys are going to clock into, but I saw an excellent production in Chicago. Excellent company, great director, great actors, great set. But it was too long, and at the end of it, it's just too much. It's like, one of the things I say, it's like listening to the Ramones full blast for a while, and after a little while, as great as it is, it's like, turn this off, man. This is stupid, It's like, so it's a tricky bastard, and it's a mean play.
Right.
I'll say that about it, which is not really my style, or I try not to make my style. But this is a mean play. This is it's all set up as a trick,
Right.
And it's nasty.
The antagonists themselves are mean people. They're they're unprincipled people. One of our actors described one of the things that the play was demonstrating to the audience was what happens when you don't see value in anyone else or anything else.
Yes, this is what happens. Yeah. And one of the impulses I'm remembering now for Act 2 was for the trial was Slobodan Milosevic and his crime trial, because I remember this insane image at one point. He was there, he was in the court, and for some reason he was eating this big old hoagie, this big old sandwich, and he had like mayonnaise all over his face, and he was just, it was like, it's a war crime. This is insane. And so one of the other things that the play taught me about us is we'll allow you think about Mussolini, you think about the current American president, we'll allow you to be a monster as long as you're entertaining. As soon as you stop becoming entertaining, we turn on you. And then you're out. So that's sort of the trick for Fat Boy and for Fudgy, is make sure you're always engaging with that audience, that actual audience, keeping them on your side, making them think that you're not talking about me until the end, when it's direct.
And that, for me, one of the things I really just love about the script is the relationship between Fat Boy and Fudgy, right? This codependent, resentful relationship that they have, right? And what are you telling us, sort of with that relationship allegorically, right? Like, you can sort of pick up on the psychology of it, but allegorically, what is that relationship communicating?
Yeah, it's really interesting, because that's a great question. I mean, I don't know. I know that Fat Boy is just hunger. It's just a desire, and it's finally human. It's not a political thing. That's the first layer. That's easy. But it's a human thing. That it's like, you ever have a child or watch a toddler, they're monsters. They don't care. They just, this goes in my mouth. This goes in my mouth. And so he's hunger. But she is kind of, I mean, I haven't read the play in a little while, but she is, this might really be reductive as all hell, but she's the brain. She is the brains of the outfit. And there's that whole, classic Western thing of the woman actually being in charge, the woman being wiser, the woman needing to play, her lesser hand, but winning the pot. And so there's some kind of lock there between, she's got that speech at the very end. We watch you go off to battle and, wait to see who will return. And I think that's very mean view of woman.
Right.
But I think that's probably the allegory is probably, it's not Adam and Eve, but it's I don't know, Adam and Judith or something. It's like
well, a lot of people will say that a clown, right, for instance, clowns are defined and differentiated by their appetites.
Yeah,
right. Fat Boy and Fudgy, they have different appetites, right? Fat Boy has his appetite for literal consumption of whatever he happens to be.
That's right.
And Fudgy has this appetite for for sex, for one thing.
Right.
But what they share, and what I think underlies both those appetites, is an appetite for power.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. And that's because you think about everybody that Fudgy conjugates with dies.
Right.
Fat Boy kills the tenant, but he's pretty. You can hear him, right? Does he shout off? Yeah, he shouts off stage as well.
Yeah.
But she kills the prosecutor. She kills the slave at the end, right? We assume he's her lover. We never really see that, but she says, "My beautiful boy," and all that, and then she just snaps his neck. It's like it's just so she's kind of the Black Widow. It's like it's not consummated until I kill you.
Right. And again, you could see that as another kind of consumption. You consume the other until they're spent, and then you're done with them, right?
Yeah. What worth are they to you? Yeah.
Right.
And the other thing, it's interesting that's I'm thinking about the two levels of how they fit together, because Fat Boy is intentionally completely oblivious. He has no sense of what the hell's going on. He because of his blind ego and whatever the hell. But he does that a couple times where he's just like, I don't understand what you're saying, even though someone's directly saying something to him. He just doesn't get it. It's not. I don't think it's an act. I think he genuinely is like, that doesn't fit with my worldview, so I didn't hear it.
Right. The tenant strikes me out of the supporting characters. The tenant's the most interesting to me because he's a mysterious figure, right?
Yeah.
And he enters their world, right? And there seems to be a swagger to him, right? There seems to be this sense that he is there playing what he thinks is the same game, right? Right?
That's right.
Where did that character come from, and what did writing that character into the script allow you to do with the story?
Yeah, it's funny because again, the way they were written was sequentially, although Act 2 and 3 were kind of written together, but yeah, Act 1. I really had this sense. I saw this character, and I knew who was going to play it, but I saw this character as exactly that, as the the young. And he was just beautifully, and Matt, who had a stupid little blonde wig on, and when she pulls his pants down, he was wearing these ridiculous leopard skin, G-string thing. So and he was kind of dressed with a flowing white, he was the classic, male lead, but yeah. So I think that's just set up so that you'll see that confrontation between real power, and real hunger and violence and danger against the cultured, I kill people for money. I am, it's all romantic and shit. And Fat Boy's really, let's go, and then, and that fight, the way we staged it, was like that, basically it wasn't a fight, he came at him, Fat Boy grabbed him, and then spent a long time killing him. And, Matt was like just clutching and trying to get to him, but it wasn't a fight. It was
The tenant's sort of like that ideal sort of male violence that you find in movies, right?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
exactly. Exactly. It
yeah,
wasn't. There's nothing sexy about the murder, but there's also there's that very strange. This does not answer your question, but this I'm remembering this. One of the hardest rehearsal hurdles we always had was that we called it the murder speech. When Fat Boy returns in Act One, and that's a total tonal shift. I mean,
yeah.
you're going from this real ridiculous, over the top, to this fairly long. I think it might be the longest monologue. With I don't think there's a joke in there. Maybe one or two, but it's
Dark jokes, but
yeah,
yeah,
I mean, it's funny if you go like, oh my god, but it sort of drops it down because that is the most realistic depiction of an event, in the whole piece, I think, and it happens really early. It's also intentionally not America. I mean, the way he's talking about it, really, in my mind, it was, a Western European capital, the old section, the core, I mean, all this, it's like,
the architecture that he describes and so
yeah,
on.
everything feels like, it feels like a city in, a southern London or southern England or somewhere. But once we got that, you get over that and you pop back in, and you've kept the audience. Then you can start, then it should work. But yeah, have you had any? I mean, and just to throw it back on you, I noticed, but is there anything particular or general about the script that surprised you when you're actually working on it, as opposed to just reading it?
Yeah, quite a lot. I mean, well, for one thing, Act One, I think we finally cracked it last night with the exercise of trying the different tones.
Right.
I think we finally found the right balance for that particular moment you're describing, that monologue. Right. And everything else was working. And in fact, that monologue was pretty good. It's been good for a while. But there was something, because you're right, it does sort of, it's out of place in the rest of the act in a way. And finally, I think we found the right balance of tones just through experimentation last night. But one of the other things that surprised me about the script quite a lot, and continues to surprise me, is that one, it's often billed as a satire of American politics and culture, which it is.
Right, it is.
Really, it is. Right. But it's also, I think, very, very universal. And what is being satirized is universal, because what's satirized, as I understand it now, isn't particular to the United States. It isn't particular to any particular culture or anything like that. It's human. There's something about humanity. There's something about human nature. It's something about what human beings create and destroy. I'm seeing.
And why they do it, and why we allow it, and why we're entertained by it. And I mean, I think as a director, the way I always look at it is, not always, what I try to approach is, you got to look at the end. You got to study the end of a piece carefully and say, okay, in a way, we're being detectives, and we got to work our way back to how do we get there. And that last speech is very direct. Look in the mirror. Look in the mirror. Look at your neighbor. This is not about America. This is not about George W. Bush. This is not, even though that's, I wrote that. A lot of the end of the second act, his speech is directly lifted from the official defense policy. I don't know what they call it, but George W. Bush put out that doctrine, lack of a better word, of premeditated. As long as there's a tiny little thing, we will act upon it.
Preemptive strikes.
Preemptive strikes. Cheney's 1% doctrine, and that was a real shift. I mean, that so much was going on that nobody even clocked it. But I remember reading and going, "Holy shit, man! This is a big switch in how in foreign policy." And so it's, as what you're saying, it's rooted in there, of course. And I'm an American writer, so of course we're looking at the end of the American Empire, of course. But you got to, and there are breadcrumbs all through there. End of second act as well. L'état c'est moi.
Yeah,
that's not America. You know, I even put in against a lot of people, over a lot of people's objections, I put in Yes We Can,
Yeah.
Obama, you know, because it's like, I love Obama, but he was king of the drones, man. He you know, the drone strikes over the Obama administration through the fucking roof, man.
Right.
So, you know, there's trying to be a lot there that is, you know, Churchill is in there, but you know, but yeah, I'm glad you're seeing that because
Yeah.
the
Well,
least successful productions have hammered the American. Like literally, I saw one where at the very end, they literally had the whole thing kind of took place in this hillbilly shack, and at the end of it, they had a big thing where the roof of the shack rolled down to reveal an American flag. So it's kind of like, here we go, you know. And it was like, and the audience liked it. It was fine.
right.
Like, you know.
Well, we're leaning hard on, you know, sort of the Americana aspect of it. But what we're trying to do is universalize through the particular, right? And we've actually very not at all subtly added the Canadian elements to Act 3 that
Cool.
basically the slave's costume is a stereotypical Mountie costume. Because that represents the role I believe Canada tends to play with the U.S. But it's all of us, right? It's all of us, and and I think if you don't find those threads in Acts 1 and 2, the speech at the end of Act 3 comes out of nowhere, right? It doesn't belong unless you found those threads.
Unless you built it in, yeah. And I'll tell you this, man. I mean, you know, we can talk afterwards if you got a sense of it, or talk now. If there's I'm not that familiar with Canadian politics. If there is a line that you want to pop into that speech at the end of Act 2 that will resonate with the Canadian audience, you know, that is like that will sort of wake them up a little bit. Go ahead, man. I mean, you know, rhythmically, let me know where you want it, or let me know what it is, and I can look at it and pop it in.
I think one of the things that I think a lot of Americans don't realize about Canada is that we are voracious consumers of U.S. culture. You know, we watch U.S. news. You know, when I was raised to practically worship the U.S. I had to memorize all the U.S. states, capitals, and rivers before I knew the Canadian provinces.
Wow.
And especially here in Windsor, because we're just a stone's throw from Detroit. Like you can walk
I had no idea
from my house. People from the rest of Canada find the accents here strange because they're very influenced by Detroit.
They're American, right?
So
Detroit.
For Canada, our population is so concentrated along the border, and we consume so much U.S. media that I think Canadians are fooling themselves when they draw firm lines, firm boundaries between the cultures.
Right, and it's so. I mean, it's so. Here we are. You know, my buddy C.J. Hopkins is a genius. He's a playwright. He, you know, years ago, I was talking about something. He said, John, countries don't matter anymore, man. You're missing the point. You know, it's like that's totally, really almost 19th century way of thinking about it. It's like it's all transnationals, and we're all consuming the same. I mean, obviously, if you go to, you know, Zimbabwe or something, it's going to be a little different, but not that much. You know, it's like it's amazing. You go to these tiny little places and people have the VCRs. They're watching, you know, the same shit that we're watching, and it's the culture. It's one. Yeah, I hear you, man. It's
There's an interesting cultural homogeneity that's been growing for decades now, and now we're also seeing a backlash against it with these assertions of national identity, right? In various ways. But in a way, it's a backlash that exists because of exactly what you're describing. You know, I think in many ways.
Exactly. And on our side, of course, it's like how many Canadian actors, big stars in Hollywood, that nobody knows they're Canadian. You know, nobody here is like, what? Jim Carrey's Canadian? I thought he was American. No, he's not American, you know.
Any Canadian actor has to move to the U.S., otherwise they're spending their days on a day job, because you can't support yourself as an actor in Canada.
Exactly, yeah. Oh, man.
One of the things I'm really fascinated about, that I find really unique about Fat Boy 2, is the structure of it. And you talked a little bit about it, but, you know, it's in a really superficial sense, right? You've got that mammoth sort of thing going where every scene has its own act, right?
Right.
Like, yes,
Right.
but it's clearly not, a mammoth sort of play. And you've got even sort of influences of what I see as influences from the old pantomimes, such
Very
as
much.
Fat Boy and Fudgy's asides to the audience. They're
Very
breaking
much.
the fourth wall and all of that.
Yep. Very much.
And then you've got the entr'actes. So
Yeah.
to explain the structure of this to me, how did
Right.
this come
Right.
together?
Well, I've always been fascinated with vaudeville, which is really, except for the 20th century musical, is really the vaudeville and the musical are America's only genuine contribution to world theater, and vaudeville was and the minstrel show, which came out of vaudeville, but that sense of always acknowledging an audience, always acknowledging the artificiality of what's happening on stage, and that actually that leads through, I think, almost everything I've written that I think is any good. Is at some point reminding the audience, hey, you're sitting in a room with a bunch of other people watching me do this. Don't fall asleep. This is not a dream. This is not scary. And so I think those two things of the fun, basically the entertainment value of telling people, here's the big red curtain and we're all dressed up like this, and it's a show, and sort of not just mocking that, but really kind of having fun with that is important. But also the entr'actes and the the bullshit about we're not getting paid and this is a bunch of shit, and our public has been sending us telegrams and all this shit. It's just, again, another way to break it down to keep the audience from taking it, in a sense, it's a kind of a loaded phrase, keep the audience from taking it seriously, but at the same time, making them take it seriously, where this is really going on. Again, when I teach, I try to tell the students or whatever, that theater is first of all, it's a physical act. You have to be there. You have to breathe. The performers and you have to be there. So it's a physical act. And secondly, it's a social act, because it has to happen. Even if it's a drawing room. Even if it's a reading in your living room, it's a social act. Then it's a political act, and it takes a while for it to get to be a psychological, or emotional act. That's kind of far down the list. And I think the detour of American theater, most Western theater of the last 100 years or so, is the primacy of psychological and emotional. That's what what we've been trained to think about as writers, directors, performers, designers. How do we make it real? And how do we get that psychological depth, and how do we tap into that emotion? And it's fantastic. Tennessee Williams, Eugene O'Neill, all these guys, fantastic, and all their descendants. But I really feel it's a detour. I really feel like once they invented film, it's kind of like once they invented photography, the serious painters realized we got to do something different. We can't keep making it perfect and making it look like a window, because you can do that with a photograph much better. We got to find what are our limitations, 2-dimension and color and this, and how do we make that amazing? And in the theater, you got those limitations. If you want to say, Shakespeare knew how to do it. Shakespeare was doing his stuff in broad daylight on a essentially bare stage in front of a crazy, loud, drunken group of louts, So he knew how to do it, and he'd walk out there. Well, here we are in Verona, get it? So now we can move on, and all these sides. And and I say to the writers mostly, but it's like, look, if you want to make a beautiful psychological drama, write a screenplay, man. Number one, you can do it better. And number two, you got a chance of making a whole lot more money than writing.
Well, they're not being produced anymore so much, those kinds of films, right? So it might mean that maybe now theater can come back and fill that.
Maybe Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, it's not, I don't think it's, I don't, I mean, one of the most moving experiences in the theater I've ever had was Death of a Salesman on Broadway with Brian Dennehy. And it was magic. I mean, it was magic. And that's not a realistic play, really, if you do it right. But it was this, the acting was so, and I got to see Uta Hagen on stage once, which was, wow. I mean, no words.
Yeah.
So I get I value that, respect
Right.
that. I'm just not interested in that. I'm not interested in
Right.
spending my time doing that.
Yeah.
So
So the vaudeville.
long answer, but I think it was basically, I like the structure was, let's make it old school so that it's instantly recognizable. Act, entre act, entre. It's a 3-act play in
Right.
a very short period of time. And those limitations, I think, help the audience along. So you kind of you get a rhythm.
Yeah.
You get to understand what's going to happen next, and then it surprises you what happens in between. But the structure is comforting.
Right. And that vaudeville influence explains the inclusion of Three Little Fishies in Act 2.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, breaking the song. Right. Unfortunately, we had to cut it because we're not allowed to sing
Because of the production
with an audience. But we did find a fun little bit to replace it. But I'm curious about why that song in particular. Why Three Little Fishies? Of all things.
Well, it's such a silly little song, I mean, it's hard not to sing that song without smiling, It's like, I mean, the words are stupid, the rhythm is stupid. So if you put that, and anyone who knows the song, again, it's sort of this discordant. It's like, what are they saying? What are these words?
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun with that. We even did a bit where Jody, the original Jody, he played live piano a lot through it, whenever he wasn't on stage. And so Dell was, and that's my song. And he just kept on doing the big ending, and Jody kept vamping and vamping and vamping. And he kind of got lost in it. He was like having so much fun. And so Dell runs out of breath. Oh, and continues staring him down. Finally, he just walks over to the piano and breaks Jody's neck. And Jody collapses onto the keys. So you get that conk. It was a good bit. It was a good bit, yeah. It was really pretty funny.
Well, I'm also curious about how this play has been received. How was it received when you first premiered it? And then over time, has that changed or?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. It's like I say, it's a mean play. It's written to sucker punch you. The original production in Edinburgh 2004 was a huge hit. Reviews, crazy reviews. I thought it was going to transfer to London. I had a deal on the table, but like all theater deals, didn't come through. But it was interesting too because the profanity. We haven't talked about that. So opening night, I think, no, we'd already opened, but we were playing in the, do you know have you been to the Edinburgh Fringe?
Oh, no.
Okay, well, there's a go, it's amazing if they ever have it again. Yeah. We were playing in a fairly large theater, 300-seat theater, big for the Fringe. And I watched a lot of it. I'd watch or at least watch the beginning and then go out and just be able to listen to make sure that it was working. I'm sitting down in the 5th row one afternoon. We played in the afternoon, and there was this nice English gentleman sitting next to me. This side of me, the aisle's that way, and curtain up, pretty big house, curtain up, and Mike screams out, "Motherfuck, cocksucking, fuck-headed, motherfucking fuck!" And this gentleman sitting there goes, "Nope, not for me."
That's amazing.
And I was so happy, and we had a lot of fun. You talk about how it was received critically through the roof, but it really split the audience. We would have regular walkouts, and not like one or two. We would have 15, 20 people get up and walk out, and I'd have to tell my performers what a gift that was, because two things. Number one, if they're hating it, that energy is going to be in the room. And it's actually going to fuck up other people's enjoyment of it. So if you're really hating it, I tell that people directly, if you don't like this, get out, man. Life is short. Right. What are you doing? You know, I walk out of theater. You know, I don't storm out, but I'll walk out of theater. I'm like, this is not. I'm not enjoying this. Leave. But the other thing is clearly, it's hard for a performer sometimes. You say, look, you're doing something. You're actually you're provoking enough. How rare is that you're able to do in the 21st century, do theater that moves somebody to the extent that they're like, I can't watch this. And that's, and then of course the flip side is you'll get people who cannot believe what they're seeing. You know, we had the most amazing, you're reminding me of something in that performance you had in the theater. There were like, I don't know, 30 other companies playing in the same, this was a multi-venue. It had 6 or 7 different little theaters in one building. And so we all had our little mailboxes. Every company had a little mailbox up in the front by the ticket office. So I go in there one day and there's just this little note, just a piece of, you know, notebook paper. And it said, Dear Fat Boy, this is skint girl. I didn't know that word. It's a Scottish word, skint, S-K-I-N-T, which means broke. I'm skint. I'm skint. Okay. Dear Fat Boy, this is skint girl. I won tickets to your performance on the radio, and I saw it yesterday. And I saw my landlord and my boss and my friends and myself. Thank you so much, skint girl. And it was like, wow, man, what would cause somebody, you know, you like a show, you like a show. You go home and you tell your friends you like the show. But to actually put in the effort to write a note, you know, and put it in, was like, that was it. That was the best review we ever got, man. It was like, wow. So it has changed. I've had people who really hated it, and friends, you know, people I respect, and they're just like, it's just too obvious. It's just too, and it's too repetitive. It just goes on and on. I had a great critique. There's a guy named Aaron Posner, who I've known forever, a very, very successful and talented American director and adapter. He's adapted a bunch of great Chekhov shows. The Wild Duck. No, not the Wild Duck. One of them he called a Stupid Fucking Bird, and he's directed a lot of Chekhov shows like all through his career, so he knows them in and out, so he makes them modern. Anyway, he saw that premiere performance, and he said, amazing. You got to work in the third act, because the second act is so the second act just as a piece works better, I think, than any of the other acts. It just is like, just as a piece of like Marx Brothers farcical, you know, just as far as structure and you know, craft, it really works. Then you got to top that. So and in the original premiere, I really didn't, and he had all these suggestions, and that's why there's that Shakespearean bit at the top. You know, because I was trying to, again, just like take it to another place, but then I didn't want. That seemed like a gag that Fat Boy wouldn't put up with for that long. You know, it seemed like too much work for him to, you know, think up all that shit. So, so yeah, I mean, I've had people, and the language, you know, I've had people just say, but that's the trick too, man. I mean, you talk about mean, and I put that in there, and I got one person, I got my aunt, and she said, she saw a New York production. She said, yeah, John, but you know, it was great, but the language. And I said, and this was mean, but I said, all right, Kay, it was actually Nancy's aunt, my wife's aunt. I said, so just let me be clear on this. We're sitting in a bar afterwards. The fact that the character kills a Jew in the middle of the court, that's not what you were offended by? You were offended by that he says fuck a lot? That's interesting. That's you know, and that's being an asshole, but it's like, that is kind of built in there, where it's like, what are you offended by, you know?
Right. You know, honestly, my nightmare is you know, quiet appreciation and polite applause. I I want people to feel something, and it honestly doesn't matter so much to me what it is they feel, as long as they feel it intensely. Now,
Yeah.
sure, ideally, I'd want it to be a sense of delight or joy or
Of course.
fascination, but if it's rage, I'm okay.
You did
Our
something.
most successful production so far was an original musical that we wrote called Another Fucking Christmas Play, fucking musical. And and yeah, we had a lot of
For the kids.
walkouts. Well, it's in the title. What do you think you're coming to see? But also, we had a lot of repeats. A lot of people coming back to see it multiple times. The audience was split. There was absolutely no one in that middle zone that I hate.
There you go. There you go.
The audience was split, and that's what I want.
It's everything. I mean, it's like there's an amazing play, if you can find it. I don't think it's in print. I could send it to you. It's called The Adventures of Nervous Boy. And it was done, it was in a collection that I put together but never got published. James Comtois was the playwright. And he worked with, this was done in the late 90s in New York. It's an amazing piece. I can't describe it. It's a night.
I would love to read it.
It's amazing. Tonight, if I can find, I'll send it. It's a night on a town in New York. Night on a town in New York, and it's amazing. And I was talking to these guys because I love to play. And I wanted to put it in this collection, and so I was telling them, tell me, what the original impulse was, and what was it like? And James says, well, we rehearsed it, and we got it up, and it was opening night, and me and the director were standing waiting for the crowd to come in. Whatever, 15 people, and suddenly we got nervous. Not that people wouldn't like it, but that people would think we were emotionally deranged for even putting it up, because that they would worry about our psychological health. and it's like, oh my God, but it's fantastic play. I mean, it's just like, one of the stage directions is, the guy's at a bar and somebody kills the girl next to him, and then like a demon or whatever the fuck comes in and drags her off, and that's like the stage direction.
Oh, I love
that. Something.
Have you ever felt that Fat Boy went too far at any point in the script, or that it didn't go far enough?
Yeah, I'm sure it didn't go far enough in places. There's struggle. I mean, as far as content, no, nothing goes that far. I mean, to be in New York City and have Fat Boy say, strike the testimony, Your Honor, the witness is a Jew, and let that just sit there in New York City was amazing, because you could feel, and it was a hit downtown crowd, of course. You'd feel that suddenly it went too far. Suddenly you could feel the tension. And then the judge would do the thing, and then tension, and then he'd do the laugh. And at that point, the laugh had been Pavlovian enough that the audience would go. So I'm sure it could go farther, but no, I think it's I really believe this, man. It's like everything's funny if you can find the funny. I mean, a barbecue at Auschwitz is funny if you can figure out how to get there. I can't, I can't.
Maybe something best not for certain people to try.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't pull it off, it's terrible. But that's the whole, I mean, I admire stand-up comics more than I admire any other artists. I mean, Jesus, that's it, man. You if you can pull that off, and then you get the really great ones who are not lecturing or hectoring, but are going to places that no man dare tread or woman dare tread. And there's a great. I'm a big student of stand-up comedy, and there's a great thing called Talking Funny. Ricky Gervais is interviewing Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, and Louis C.K. And this is years ago, before C.K. got disgraced. And they're talking about, now I will be politically correct here. They are talking about the use of the N-word, and Louis C.K. and Chris Rock use it all the time, because they figured it out. They figured out how to make it work. Not offensive, it's very instructive. And
Dave
but Seinfeld says, and somebody said, Seinfeld, they said, you would never, can you imagine Jerry Seinfeld using that word? And Seinfeld very cleverly and correctly says, I have never found the funny in that, nor do I seek it. Which I thought was really funny. He's like, no, that's not my wheelhouse. That's not where I'm going.
Right. He's the wrong person for that.
Yeah, just not. That's not gonna. I've seen a couple things, specials where he says "fucking," and it's a little shocking. It's a little like Jerry.
Right. It's like the first time you see Bob Saget do stand up, and he hasn't quite figured out how to do it without just being shocking because he's Bob Saget.
Oh, it's so funny.
Haven't found a way to make it funny, I think.
Him doing in the Aristocrats.
The Aristocrats. That is a good bit. That's.
It's like that's just the top of. It's just like, oh my God.
He and Sarah Silverman steal the Aristocrats, I think.
They really did.
Well, would anything change if you were to write this play today, you think?
Sure. I don't know what, but absolutely. I mean, I think you have to be. Well, so you were kind of to call back what you were talking about earlier is the universal in the particular. Mm-hmm. It's a great phrase. I'm going to steal that. Sure. Yeah, you have to. I really do think that you have to be writing. You don't have to, but I like to be writing for your actual moment, and your place often, but certainly for your moment. And so that piece was by and large written in the outrage of America's war on terror, but on America's invasion of Afghanistan. And that was, no land army has ever taken Afghanistan, nor will they ever take Afghanistan.
Right.
The Soviet Union knew that. Genghis Khan knew that. Donald Rumsfeld did not know that. And then, of course, Iraq was going on. So it was just like this. It just felt like the world was being run by idiots and clowns. And so, yeah, if I were writing today, obviously I couldn't avoid our current president. But I think a lot of the rest of it, yeah, I don't know how to answer that. I mean, but yeah, the short answer is yeah, of course it would change. It should change.
And of course it has to too, because you'll be at a different point in your life and all of that as well.
Exactly.
But when you're staging it, when you're producing it, I mean, something that we try to be conscious of is, especially with something like Fat Boy, is how do we make it this production of this moment?
Yeah, right, exactly.
And a good script will a good script can be adapted to sort of any moment in history, right? It can fit into all sorts of things because there's something human in it that ultimately you can relate to whatever's going on. And here, some of the choices we've made in our production are precisely because of the state of things right now.
Right.
And, I hope they don't embarrass you. I don't know.
I'll be honest, Michael. I'm in a place with this. It's great to be at a place with this piece, but also I think I've been writing for a while, and I used to be very precious and very defensive and possessive, of every syllable. And I've written so much since Fat Boy, and even that I've written, I've begun to. I had a great experience of having a monologue I wrote, The Event, become a big hit in Germany, and a German translation was made and is playing. I don't think it's playing right now, but it's had a lot of productions over there. And I didn't know this. A friend of mine, Mark Ravenhill, who's an English playwright, told me. He said they're doing it in Germany, and I said, "Huh?" And he said, "Well, get ready." I said, "What does that mean exactly?" And he's had a lot of work done in Germany, and over here, certainly in America, playwright's king. Playwright, you take somebody's play. Well, man, you don't change a word, you don't change a syllable. You do this, and it's all perfect, and that's how it is, or you get sued, man. Not so in Germany. Germany is a director's theater, and so what they'll do is and it's just what it is. It's culture. They will, option your script, or they will, whatever. They'll say, we're going to do your production. They'll pay you. Great. God knows what you're going to see when you show up. And I've seen video. You can see it on YouTube, and it's amazing. It's like, what the hell is happening? There's like these weird things circling around the thing. The guy is up there. It's a one-man show that is about the experience of performing a one-man show, right? It's incredibly meta, but it's all about that. I saw a production where they had 5 people on stage. And they were all sharing the lines and all this. I was like, so I don't, man. I mean, it sounds to me that you guys are, you know, you guys are on point. You know, just and like I say, maybe we should add a line that makes it more pointedly, that includes, you know, Canada, includes the audience. That could be helpful. But you know, just have fun with it. And really, it's in the stage directions or whatever, the author's notes, whatever. It's really, if you stick to that, if it's really is, you know, quite fast. If the actors will commit to the huge laughter, making it past the point of what, you know, once you feel like it's gone on too long, add another 7 seconds. Right. You know, to really beat that in, and then it's just shouting, lyricism, keep the thing moving, and it should work. You know, it should. You know, and whatever else happens.
It still makes me laugh in rehearsal when I'm watching it, so that's probably a good sign.
That's a good thing. That's a good thing. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I'll run lines in my head sometimes when I'm bored. I'm like, that's funny. That's still funny.
Well, I think it's probably a good point to end it. Thank you so much for your time. This is very generous of you.
What a pleasure. I don't think you're going to find a writer who doesn't enjoy talking about his work.